3, 2, 1. Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nisi coming back with another bullseye of a tutorial hits it on the channel. I want to show you guys how you can use limiters in your mix. On vocals specifically, I feel like limiters are misunderstood. A lot of the times people see limiters kind of like employees at McDonald's or Walmart, like, oh, they only have one job to do and that's it. But today I want to show you guys the creative side of using limiters to generate a little bit of tone and a little bit of abruptness and getting them to, make things stand in place and move around, specifically with vocals. Let's not waste no time. Let's get on the grind and let's listen to a little bit of this music.
Spinning big racks because I can. MX black card in my hand. This white dude running through ran. I can't pronounce the shit worth a damn. This strip handcraft Italian. I'm out just shopping in Milan. Bitch got her pieces, designer thesis, income increases. Sweet baby Jesus, supercar keyless, seat off the meters. 100 racks on clothes, they say it's needless. Find a designer, catch me in my lineup. Handcraft attire, one single buyer.
Okay, so you guys get a general understanding of the music. If you guys do like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to check out the Patreon where we drop those super secret quiet gems. All right, so let's not waste no time. With the very first primitive limiters, I think of things somewhere along the lines of something like a, like a Fairchild specifically. So, back in the day with the Fairchild, that actual name of limiter and compressor kind of is interchangeable. It goes hand in hand. So the thing about a compressor is it controls the dynamic range, and usually they might have a limiter behind it, like a broadcast limiter that kind of stops any overshooting peaks or anything like that. The very first compressors were actually having very slow attack and kind of like very slow release, them very compressors. So they found that, okay, we might have to use something like a limiter behind this broadcasting compressor to make sure we don't have no overshoots. Very important thing to understand. So any ratio that is 20 or more makes it a limiter. You feel me? So anything below is compression, but as you start to increase the ratio more, you see that this line right here, which is kind of like the knee as well a little bit too, it becomes a little bit more abrupt, so also, with the knee, depending on how you do it, your compressor could become very abrupt, kind of sounding like a Detroit rapper or a rude ass person always interrupting it. It will give that sound of quote unquote rudeness. So I want to show you guys how I like to use something like a limiter today on something like a lead vocal. Okay, so for me, limiters, I kind of see them in a situation as, SSL E channel. Sometimes if I want a little bit of transient enhancement, like how I say I want it to be a little bit more authoritative, I will use something like a limiter to bring out a little bit of the transient. Little did you know, something like a SSL E channel strip even has is a limiter. Whenever you see that infinity ratio, that's pretty much limiting, infinity and beyond, right? And you can use a little bit of limiting on your vocal to bring a little bit of tone and aggressiveness. For a female vocal like this, that's what I wanted. So I brought that in. So, I brought in the highest ratio. And usually with a limiter, you kind of want the fastest release as well, depending on how you want to go about doing it. But me personally, knowing that I want abruptness, interruption, I want it to sound like it kind of has, like, no offense, but Tourette's or something like that, where it's like it's kind of like spazzing a little bit with the vocal. I use the limiter ratio with the fastest release and only doing about 1 to 2 to 3 dB, nothing crazy, but just enough to add a little bit of transient enhancement. That's a great way to use the limiter on the vocal.
Bitch got her pieces, designer thesis, income increases. Sweet baby Jesus, supercar keyless, seat off the meters. 100 racks on clothes, they say it's needless. Find a designer, catch me in my lineup. Handcraft attire, one single buyer, never one prior. Pressure applier, give me nothing less than best, that's on my soul. That Fendi too cold, watch rose gold. Buy and hold out, no it can't be sold. Fly across the world just to get it if it's worth it. Designer said he aimed to get it damn near luxury purchase. Yeah, cause he earned it, pay for the service, crafted with purpose. Yeah, I put bus
The beautiful thing about using a limiter on a lead vocal for rap vocal is it kind of boosts up the consonants. Let's be curse, yeah, like now you start to hear a little bit of what people would say is the harshness. For me, that's not the harshness. For me, that's the reality of the vocal. You know, the hard gust of air and all the plosives and stuff like that. You know, once you can get that some of that cleaned up with your beginning stages of EQ and compression, you know what I mean? What you can do is using maybe a little something like a limiter, just like 1 to 2 to really, start to really kind of like squeeze the dynamic range of the vocal. And of course, a limiter will take all the ground level signal and kind of boost it up too, boosting the noise floor a little bit. But you hear it adds a lot of impact to her vocal, especially with a female vocal. That's what I want. I want it to cut through and have a little bit of authority, you know, let her talk her shit. You feel me? So that's a great way to use a limiter. Another great way to use a limiter is something like on Adlibs. Maybe you say you have a situation where we know Adlibs are, you know, kind of like quick burst of words, quick burst of energy, like a starburst or something like that. It's just like a gushers or something like that. You know, the energy from Adlibs like, ooh, hey, go. You feel me? It's very, very sharp on the front end. So sometimes you might want those Adlibs to maybe sit back a little bit. And also understanding transients, right? That's also the distance of, you know, what you perceive as something as is like the high mid energy, right? So for Adlibs, it's pretty important for me to decide, do I want my Adlibs to be open? Which, you know, usually if you let more of the transient of the Adlib come through, it's gonna make it feel like it's closer. Because when somebody's closer to you, you could see the spit in the drop, the mouth, all that shit come out of their mouth. You know, that's something that you would never like really hear if you were, let's say, 30 feet away from them. You feel me? Or in a whole nother city. So that's why I love to use limiters on Adlibs to actually like control like transient management throughout the whole mix. So let's look at this, how I use the L1 limiter, which is another great limiter as well, to just help the Adlibs hold and stay in place. I don't want them to be like all over the place, you feel me? But I use the L1 to control the transients. So that's another great way to use a limiter, you feel me? Controlling the transients in one way, and before I showed you how to enhance the transient. So if you want a little bit more impact, a little bit more of those scissors, a little bit more of that Gordon Ramsay knife cutting through, you might want to use the limiter on the SSLE. But if you want something to be held and stay in place, you might want to use the L1.
She worth a damn. Strip handcraft Italian. Your mouth just shopping in Milan. Bitch got her pieces, designer thesis, incoming creases. Sweet baby Jesus, super car key, craft Italian. Your mouth just shopping in Milan. Bitch got her pieces, designer craft Italian. Your mouth just shopping in Milan. Bitch got her pieces, designer thesis. She worth a damn. Strip handcraft Italian. Your mouth just shopping in Milan. Bitch got her pieces, designer. She worth a damn. Strip handcraft Italian. Your mouth just shopping in Milan. Bitch got her pieces.
So as you can kind of hear, one, when it has the limiter in, it kind of sounds like a pancake. But when it doesn't have the limiter in and the transient is allowed to come open up a little bit more into the music, now it kind of starts to sound like a cupcake. Like it's a little bit more full, a little bit more dense, a little bit more thicker with the batter. So that's a great way to use something like an L1 limiter also to generate distortion. I like to also use something like a limiter, maybe start to go really abrupt, like 6, 7, 8 dB. It will start to pump and do a little bit of artifacts, which is cool. Personally, if you're going for something lo-fi, pay attention. I'm working with intentions, right? You see my lo-fi plugin is right here. So I'm getting a little bit of my lo-fi from this, Pro Tools plugin, as well as the L1 itself, generating some distortion. A great way to take a little bit of Tabasco sauce and place it on them Adlibs is using something like a limiter. Okay, so after that, I want to show you guys another great way to use a limiter, which is in parallel. So this is one of my favorite limiters by far. And this limiter is a little bit different. It's called the Farday limiter by Goodhertz. And I'm going to show you guys this real quick. I'm going to do a dedicated video. But another great way to use a limiter is in parallel to add a little bit of density to your vocal. So this limiter is a little bit better for me because I get to control the attack and release. And with most limiters, you might not be able to do that. For the most part, limiters do have a fast attack and fast release. Coming from back in the days with vinyl, they didn't really have limiters like that. So what they would do is that they would actually start like manually writing down the master fader, you feel me? So that there wasn't like overshoots that would kind of take, if the vinyl has too much like noise or whatever, if the track is too loud, too dynamically all over the place, it could make the needle bounce off of a vinyl. So that's something that they did back in the day before they had, limiters like that and digital limiters came. So Farday limiter is dope because you get to pick how much of the color do you want or not. How much of the pink Himalayan salt do you want on that bit? How much ketchup, honey, mustard, mayonnaise do you want on that bit? So that's a cool thing about this type of limiter specifically. You know, I would say most limiters have their own character. L2 got its own sound. I use that on vocals. L1 got its own sound. The SSLE got its own sound. Farday got its own sound. The Mac DSP, what is it? The Mac DSP also has a limiter as well. I can't remember what it's called. The retro limiter. That's a great lo-fi limiter. So, you know, find your own limiter. And remember, you know, you can use it on Adlibs to give it a little saturation. You can use it on your lead vocals to do a little transient enhancement. But let's also see how you can use it for density. So I'm using fast attack, fast release, because I just want a really squash signal that still has a little bit of the transitions in between the words to be blent back in. And I love how you get to pick the amount of color as well as the warmth, like the transformer warmth. And what makes this limiter a little bit better for me is it has an internal side chain. So it's not looking at the booty. It's not staring at the booty of the vocal, pretty much the bottom end of the vocal. So pay attention to how, you know, that is really, really helpful to get some clean limiting.
Designer thesis, income increases, sweet baby Jesus. Supercar keyless, feet off the meters. 100 racks on clothes, they say it's needless. Find a designer, catch me in my lineup. Handcraft attire, one single buyer, never one prior. Pressure applier, give me nothing less than best, that's all my soul. That Fendi too cold, watch rose gold. Buy and hold out, no it can't be sold. Fly across the world just to get it if it's worth it. Designer said he aimed to get it damn near luxury purchase. Yeah, cause he earned it, pay for the service, crafted with purpose. Yeah, I put Basquiat next to Leonardo. Cruising my Tesla through northern Lombardy. I've been shopping in Milan, grande. Spinning big racks because I can. MX black card in my hand. They swipe, they run it, do ran it ran. I can't pronounce the shit worth a damn. This drip handcraft Italian.
I love how that Farday limiter sounds, brings so much presence, energy, and so much, you know, like articulation. And it honestly kind of feels like there's a little bit of clarity now, because now we're giving the vocal, the listener, a point of reference. They hear the squash, nasty, dirty sound that's being blended, and now they hear that vocal. So in comparison, the lead vocal sounds even cleaner because now we took a little bit of that dirt, a little bit of that soil, a little bit of that muck and put it behind it, giving the listener a point of reference. Now you just hear everything better. So I just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube family. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Drop more video ideas down below. And don't forget to check out that Patreon where we drop those super secret gems. Appreciate y'all now. Peace.